My daughter didn't speak to me for 8 years. She said I was a poor old man worthy of pity. When I received an inheritance of $23 million, she showed up at my gate with her bags and said, "Daddy, I believe it's time for a fresh start. I've decided to live with you." Subscribe to the channel for more stories like this and comment the city you're watching from. 8 years. 8 long years since I last heard my daughter's voice. And still, her words echo in my mind like a broken record that won't stop playing. I'm Patrick, 57 years old now, and I've spent nearly a decade trying to forget the day my only child looked me straight in the eye and called me a pathetic poor old man. Lordy. It was a Tuesday afternoon in March when she asked me to meet her at that fancy restaurant downtown, the kind of place where a cup of coffee costs more than I used to spend on lunch for a week. I should have known something was wrong. Sarah never wanted to be seen with me in public, especially not somewhere her new crowd might spot us together. I remember walking into that place, feeling every eye on my worn jeans and faded polo shirt. The hostess gave me one of those looks, you know the kind, like I had wandered into the wrong building by mistake. But I had made it this far, so I straightened my shoulders and asked for Sarah's table. She was already there, sitting with him, Derek, the golden boy with the perfect smile and the designer suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent. He didn't even look up when I approached, just kept scrolling through his phone like I was invisible. "Dad," Sarah said, and there was something cold in her voice that made my stomach clench. She didn't stand up to hug me, didn't even smile. I sat down across from them, my hands feeling awkward on the white tablecloth. "Hi, sweetheart, you look beautiful." And she did. My little girl had grown into this stunning woman with perfect makeup and jewelry that sparkled under the restaurant's soft lighting. But her eyes, those eyes that used to light up when she saw me coming home from work, were distant now, almost hostile. "We need to talk," she said, glancing at Derek, who finally looked up from his phone with an expression of barely contained irritation. That's when my heart started racing. The way she said it, the way Derek was looking at me like I was some kind of pest they needed to deal with. I knew this wasn't going to be a pleasant conversation. "Sarah, what's going on?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. She took a deep breath, and for a moment I thought I saw a flicker of the little girl who used to curl up in my lap while I read her bedtime stories. But it disappeared as quickly as it came. "I'm getting married," she announced. The words should have filled me with joy. My daughter, the center of my world since her mother passed away when she was 12, was starting a new chapter of her life. But the way she said it, like she was delivering bad news, made my chest tight. "That's wonderful," I managed to say, looking between her and Derek. "Congratulations." Derek finally spoke up, his voice dripping with condescension. "Thank you, sir. Sarah and I have been discussing our future, and we've decided it's time to make some changes." Changes? I didn't like the sound of that word. Sarah fidgeted with her engagement ring, a massive diamond that caught the light every time she moved her hand. "Dad, Derek comes from a very prominent family. His father owns 3 companies and they move in certain circles." I nodded, still not understanding where this was going. "That's great, honey. I'm happy for you both. The thing is," she continued, and now she wouldn't meet my eyes, "we're planning a very upscale wedding. Derek's family is flying in from Europe, and there will be a lot of important people there." My stomach dropped. I knew what was coming before she even said it. "I think it would be better if you didn't attend." The words hit me like a physical blow. I actually felt my body recoil, as if she had reached across the table and slapped me. The noise of the restaurant seemed to fade away, and all I could hear was the sound of my own heartbeat thundering in my ears. "What?" I whispered. Derek leaned forward, his smile sharp and cruel. "What Sarah is trying to say is that your presence might make some of our guests uncomfortable. It's nothing personal, you understand. It's just that you don't really fit the image we're going for." I looked at my daughter, waiting for her to tell him he was wrong, that of course her father would be at her wedding. But she just sat there, staring at the table. "Sarah," I said, my voice breaking, "please tell me you don't mean this." "Well," she finally looked up, and what I saw in her eyes destroyed me. It wasn't anger or frustration. It was embarrassment. She was ashamed of me. "Dad, you have to understand. This is important to me. Derek's family has certain expectations, and I can't afford to disappoint them." "I'm your father," I said. and I heard the desperation in my own voice. I raised you. I worked 3 jobs after your mother died, just to make sure you could go to college. And I'm grateful for that, she said quickly. But that doesn't change the fact that you're just a maintenance worker living in a rundown apartment. Derek's friends wouldn't understand. The words hung in the air between us like poison. Derek was nodding approvingly, as if she had just given the correct answer to a test question. I felt something inside me break. Not just my heart, but something deeper. The part of me that believed in unconditional love, in family bonds that couldn't be severed by money or social status. "So what are you saying?" I asked, though I already knew. Sarah's voice was barely above a whisper. "I'm saying that maybe it's time we stopped pretending that we belong in the same world. You're a nice man, Dad, but you're also a pathetic, poor old man who reminds me of everything I'm trying to leave behind." The silence that followed was deafening. I stared at this stranger sitting across from me, this woman who looked like my daughter, but spoke like someone I had never met. Derek was smirking now, enjoying the show. "Sarah's told me all about her humble beginnings. It's quite an inspiring story, really. Rising above her circumstances to become the sophisticated woman she is today." I stood up slowly, my legs feeling unsteady beneath me. Every person in that restaurant seemed to be watching us now, though that might have just been my imagination. "I see," I said, surprised by how calm my voice sounded. "Well then, I guess there's nothing left to say." Sarah looked up at me then, and for just a second, I thought I saw regret flicker across her face. But then, Derek reached over and took her hand, and whatever moment of doubt she might have had disappeared. "Dad, it's better this way. You'll see." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. I reached into my wallet and pulled out a $20 bill, the only cash I had with me, and placed it on the table. "For the coffee," I said. Then I walked out of that restaurant and out of my daughter's life, not knowing that it would be 8 years before I saw her again. The first year was the hardest. I kept thinking she would call, that maybe after the wedding, excitement died down. She would remember that she still had a father who loved her. I bought a birthday card in September, the kind with flowers on the front that she used to like when she was little. I wrote a simple message inside. "Happy 26th birthday, sweetheart. I love you and I'm proud of you. Dad." I mailed it to the address I had for her old apartment, hoping it would get forwarded to wherever she was living with Derek now. It came back 2 weeks later with a return to sender stamp, no forwarding address. I tried calling the number I had for her, but it went straight to a message saying the number was no longer in service. That's when I realized she had changed everything. Her address, her phone number, probably even her last name by now. She had erased me from her life completely. The second year, I hired a private investigator. I know that sounds desperate, but I needed to know that she was okay. I needed to know that my daughter was safe and happy, even if she didn't want me in her life anymore. The investigator found her living in a gated community about 2 hours away, in a house that probably cost more than I would make in a lifetime. He showed me pictures. Sarah looked beautiful, walking out of some upscale boutique with shopping bags in her hands. Derek was beside her, looking every inch the successful businessman in his expensive suits. They looked like they belonged in a magazine, the perfect couple living the perfect life. I stopped hiring the investigator after that. Seeing those pictures hurt too much. By the third year, I had started following her on social media. I know I shouldn't have, but I couldn't help myself. She posted under her married name now, Sarah Whitmore, and her life looked like something out of a fairy tale. Vacation photos from Paris and Italy. Pictures of her at charity galas wearing gowns that sparkled under ballroom lights. Snapshots of expensive dinners at restaurants I could never afford to enter. She never mentioned having a father, never posted any throwback photos from her childhood or talked about where she came from. It was like Patrick Morrison had never existed, like she had sprung into the world fully formed as Derek Whitmore's sophisticated wife. I found myself checking her pages obsessively, scrolling through months of posts, looking for any sign that she might miss me. But there was nothing, just an endless parade of luxury and privilege, a life carefully curated to show the world how far she had risen. The fourth year brought news of their move to an even bigger house. Sarah posted pictures of the housewarming party, and I recognized some faces from the society pages of the local newspaper. Politicians, business leaders, people whose names carried weight in the city. My daughter was now part of that world, and I understood why she thought there was no place for someone like me in it. I started having dreams about her during the fifth year. Not good dreams, but not exactly nightmares either. Dreams where I would run into her at the grocery store or the gas station, and she would look right through me like I was a stranger. Dreams where I tried to call out to her, but no sound would come from my mouth. I would wake up feeling hollow inside, like someone had scooped out my chest with a spoon. It was around that time that I stopped checking her social media. I realized that watching her life from the sidelines was only making the pain worse. She had made her choice, and I needed to find a way to live with it. The sixth year was when I finally started seeing Dr. Matthews, a therapist who specialized in family trauma. I had always been the type of man who believed you handled your problems on your own, but the loneliness was eating me alive. I needed help, and I wasn't too proud to ask for it anymore. Dr. Matthews helped me understand that grief comes in many forms, that you can mourn the loss of someone who is still alive. We talked about how Sarah's rejection wasn't really about me at all, but about her own insecurities and her need to distance herself from anything that reminded her of a life she viewed as inferior. "She's not the little girl you raised anymore," Dr. Matthews told me during one session. "The woman she's become has made choices that hurt you deeply, but holding on to anger will only poison your own well-being." I tried to take his advice to heart, but forgiveness felt impossible when the wound was still so fresh. The seventh year brought changes to my own life. I finally retired from my job at the apartment complex where I had worked as a maintenance supervisor for 23 years. My arthritis was getting worse, and climbing ladders wasn't getting any easier. The residents threw me a small retirement party, and Mrs. Chen from apartment 12B made a speech about how I had always been there when they needed help. Standing there in that community room surrounded by people who genuinely cared about me, I realized that I did have a family of sorts. It wasn't the family I had dreamed of, but it was real, and it was mine. I started volunteering at the local food bank, helping to sort donations and serve meals to people who were struggling. There was something healing about being useful again, about knowing that my work mattered to someone. I met other volunteers who had their own stories of loss and disappointment, and I began to understand that I wasn't alone in my pain. By the 8th year, I had built a quiet but fulfilling life. I had my small apartment, my volunteer work, and a few close friends who knew my story and accepted me anyway. I still thought about Sarah every day, but the sharp edge of grief had dulled into a manageable ache. I stopped expecting her to call. I stopped imagining scenarios where she would show up at my door asking for forgiveness. I accepted that some bridges, once burned, can never be rebuilt. That's why, when she finally did show up, I almost didn't believe it was real. It was a Thursday morning in late October when I heard the knock on my door. I was drinking my coffee and reading the newspaper, enjoying the quiet of my morning routine. The knock was tentative at first, then more insistent. I opened the door, and there she was, my daughter, standing on my doorstep with 2 expensive suitcases at her feet and a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Hello, Dad," she said, as if 8 years of silence was nothing more than a brief pause in conversation. "I believe it's time we started over. I've decided to come live with you." I stood there frozen, my coffee mug still in my hand, trying to process what I was seeing. She looked older, more polished than in her social media photos, but there were lines around her eyes that hadn't been there before. Behind her smile, I caught a glimpse of something that looked almost like desperation. And that's when I knew that Sarah Whitmore hadn't come home to reconcile with her father. She had come because she needed something from Patrick Morrison, and whatever it was important enough to make her swallow 8 years of pride. 3 weeks before Sarah showed up at my door, my life changed in a way I never could have imagined. It started with a phone call on a Tuesday afternoon while I was sorting canned goods at the food bank. Mrs. Rodriguez, who managed the volunteer schedule, tapped me on the shoulder and pointed toward the office. "Patrick, there's a call for you. Says it's urgent." I wiped my hands on my jeans and walked to the small office in the back, wondering who could possibly be calling me there. I had given the food bank's number as my emergency contact for a few things, but I couldn't think of any emergency that would require reaching me immediately. "This is Patrick Morrison," I said into the phone. "Mr. Morrison, this is James Hutchinson from Hutchinson, Bradley and Associates. We're an estate planning firm here in the city. I'm calling regarding the estate of your uncle, Thomas Morrison." I frowned, trying to place the name. Uncle Thomas, my father's brother, the one who had moved away when I was still a kid and never came back for family gatherings. I hadn't seen him in probably 30 years, maybe longer. "I'm sorry, Mr. Hutchinson, but I think there might be some mistake. My Uncle Thomas and I weren't close. I barely knew him. I understand this might come as a surprise, Mr. Morrison, but according to Mr. Thomas Morrison's will, you are named as his sole beneficiary. I'm going to need you to come to our office to discuss the details of your inheritance." The word inheritance hit me like a physical blow. I actually had to sit down in the rickety office chair, my legs suddenly feeling unsteady. "I'm sorry, what did you say?" "Your Uncle Thomas passed away 6 weeks ago. He lived a very private life, which is why it took us some time to locate you. But his will is very clear. He has left his entire estate to you, Mr. Morrison." I tried to process what he was telling me. Uncle Thomas had always been the mysterious figure in our family stories, the one who had made it big somehow, but never stayed in touch. My father used to mention him sometimes, usually with a mixture of pride and resentment. "Mr. Hutchinson, can you tell me what exactly we're talking about here? I mean, what kind of estate?" There was a pause on the other end of the line, and I could hear papers shuffling. "Mr. Morrison, I think it would be better if we discussed this in person. Are you available to come to our office tomorrow morning? Say, 10 o'clock? The formal tone in his voice made my stomach flip. This wasn't about a few $1,000s or some old furniture. This was something bigger. "Yes, I can be there." He gave me the address, and I wrote it down on a scrap of paper with shaking hands. After I hung up, I sat in that little office for a full 10 minutes, staring at the wall and trying to make sense of what had just happened. The next morning, I put on my best shirt and the one pair of dress pants I owned and took the bus downtown to the law office. The building was one of those gleaming towers that made me feel small just looking at it. The lobby was all marble and glass, with security guards who looked like they could bench press my entire apartment. The elevator ride to the 23rd floor felt like it took forever. When the doors opened, I found myself in a reception area that was nicer than any place I had ever been in my life. The receptionist, a young woman with perfect hair and a smile that looked expensive, directed me to Mr. Hutchinson's office. James Hutchinson was a man in his 50s with silver hair and a handshake that conveyed both warmth and authority. His office overlooked the city, and I could see the neighborhood where I lived spread out below like a miniature model. "Mr. Morrison, please have a seat. Can I offer you some coffee?" I accepted the coffee, mainly because it gave me something to do with my hands. Mr. Hutchinson settled behind his massive desk and opened a thick folder. "I want to start by saying that your uncle spoke of you fondly, even though you hadn't been in contact for many years. He followed your life from a distance, and he was proud of the man you became." That statement confused me. Proud of what? I was a maintenance worker living in a small apartment with a daughter who was too ashamed to have me at her wedding. What was there to be proud of? "Mr. Hutchinson, I appreciate that, but I think you might have me confused with someone else. I'm nobody special." He smiled at that, the kind of smile that suggested he knew something I didn't. "Your uncle didn't think so. He made his fortune in real estate, starting with a single property and building an empire over 40 years. But he never married, never had children. When it came time to decide what to do with his wealth, he chose family." He opened the folder and pulled out a document that looked official and intimidating. "Mr. Morrison, your Uncle Thomas has left you $23 million. The words didn't register at first. I heard them, but they seemed to bounce off my brain like they were spoken in a foreign language. "I'm sorry, what?" $23 million. The bulk of it is in liquid assets, stocks, and bonds that can be easily accessed. There's also a house in Malibu and a condo in Manhattan, both of which are worth considerable amounts on their own. I set down my coffee cup because my hands were shaking too badly to hold it steady. $23 million. The number was so large, it didn't seem real. "There has to be some mistake," I whispered. "There's no mistake, Mr. Morrison. Your uncle was very specific in his wishes. He also left a letter for you." He handed me an envelope with my name written in careful handwriting. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a short message. "Patrick, I know we lost touch over the years, but I never stopped caring about my brother's son. I heard about what happened with Sarah, and I want you to know that her rejection of you says nothing about your worth as a man. You raised a daughter, worked hard your whole life, and maintained your dignity even when others didn't appreciate it. This money comes with no strings attached. Use it however you see fit. I hope it brings you some measure of happiness. Your uncle, Thomas." I read the letter 3 times before the words sank in. He had known about Sarah. Somehow, from wherever he was living his private life, he had known about my daughter's rejection and the years of silence that followed. "How did he know?" I asked Mr. Hutchinson. "Your uncle hired investigators to keep track of family members. Not to interfere, just to know how everyone was doing. He was particularly concerned about you after he learned about the situation with your daughter." The irony wasn't lost on me. I had hired an investigator to find Sarah, and Uncle Thomas had hired investigators to keep track of me. We were all watching each other from a distance, too proud or too hurt to reach out directly. "What happens now?" I asked. "Now you become a very wealthy man, Mr. Morrison. There are some papers to sign, some tax implications to discuss, but the money is yours. Your uncle also instructed us to set up accounts that will allow you immediate access to funds while the larger transfers are processed." I left that office in a daze with a check for $50,000 in my pocket as an advance on my inheritance, and a stack of papers that would change my life forever. On the bus ride home, I kept looking at the check, half expecting it to disappear like something from a dream. But it was real. All of it was real. For the first time in 8 years, I found myself thinking about Sarah not with pain, but with a bitter sense of irony. She had rejected me because I was poor, because I was an embarrassment to her new life of wealth and status. Now I was worth more money than she and Derek would probably see in their entire lives combined. The universe, it seemed, had a twisted sense of humor. That night, I sat in my small apartment, looking around at the modest furniture and worn carpet that had been my world for so many years. Tomorrow, I could buy any house I wanted, any car, any life I could imagine. But all I could think about was how none of it would have mattered 8 years ago. All I had wanted then was for my daughter to love me enough to want me at her wedding. Now, I had 23 million reasons why that would never be enough. Standing there on my doorstep with her designer luggage and practiced smile, Sarah looked like she had stepped out of one of those magazines she probably read while getting her nails done. Everything about her screamed money, from the cut of her clothes to the way she held herself. But there was something else too, something I couldn't quite put my finger at first. Desperation. "Dad," she said again, and the words sounded strange coming from her lips after so many years of silence. "Aren't you going to invite me in?" I stepped aside wordlessly, watching, as she dragged her expensive suitcases into my small living room. She looked around with barely concealed distaste, her eyes taking in the second-hand furniture and the worn carpet. Nothing had changed much since she was a child, and I could see her remembering why she had been so eager to escape this place. "It's exactly the same," she said, and I couldn't tell if she meant it as an observation or a criticism. "I haven't had much reason to redecorate," I replied, closing the door behind her. She turned to face me then, and I got my first good look at my daughter after 8 years. She was 34 now, still beautiful, but there were lines around her eyes that makeup couldn't quite hide. Her smile was too bright, too rehearsed, like she had practiced it in the mirror before coming here. "Dad, I know this must be a shock," she began, settling herself on my old couch like she owned the place. I know it's been a long time since we talked." 8 years, I said quietly. Yes, well, that's actually what I wanted to discuss with you. I've been doing a lot of thinking lately, and I realize that I may have been too hasty in my decision to distance myself from family. Too hasty. As if cutting me out of her life had been like choosing the wrong restaurant for dinner. Have you? I asked, settling into my recliner across from her. Oh yes, absolutely. Derek and I have been talking, and we both agree that family is so important. Life is short, you know. We shouldn't waste time holding grudges over silly misunderstandings. Silly misunderstandings? That's what she was calling it now. Sarah, I said carefully, you didn't talk to me for 8 years. You changed your number, moved without leaving a forwarding address, and returned my birthday cards unopened. That seems like more than a misunderstanding. Her smile flickered for just a moment, but she recovered quickly. I know it seems that way, but you have to understand, I was young and confused. Derek's family had all these expectations, and I felt caught in the middle. I thought it would be easier for everyone if I just stepped away for a while. A while turned into 8 years. I know, and I regret that. I really do. But I'm here now, aren't I? I'm ready to make things right. I studied her face, looking for any sign of genuine remorse, any indication that she truly understood the pain she had caused. But all I saw was that same practiced smile and eyes that wouldn't quite meet mine. What about Derek? I asked. I thought he didn't approve of your humble beginnings. Oh, Derek's changed completely, she said quickly. He's grown so much as a person. In fact, he was the one who encouraged me to reach out to you. He feels terrible about how things went in the past. That was interesting. The Derek I remembered from our last meeting didn't seem like the type to encourage anything that didn't benefit him directly. And what about your life with him, your marriage, your house in the gated community? For the first time since she had arrived, Sarah's composure cracked slightly. Her smile faltered, and she looked down at her hands. Well, that's actually part of why I'm here. Derek and I are going through a rough patch right now. We've decided to take some time apart to figure things out. There it was. The truth, or at least part of it, finally making an appearance. I'm sorry to hear that, I said, and I was surprised to find that I actually meant it. Despite everything, I didn't want my daughter to be unhappy. It's probably for the best, she continued, seeming to gain confidence now that she had shared this information. I've realized that I lost sight of what really matters. Money and status aren't everything. Family is what's important. She reached into her purse and pulled out her phone, swiping through photos before handing it to me. Look, these are pictures from Derek's last business trip to Europe. We spent 3 weeks touring vineyards in France. It was beautiful, but the whole time I kept thinking about how much more meaningful it would have been to share experiences like that with people who really love you. Ross. I looked at the photos, image after image of Sarah and Derek at expensive restaurants, in luxury hotels, standing in front of famous landmarks. They looked happy in the pictures, but something about Derek's smile seemed forced, like he was performing for the camera. They're lovely photos, I said, handing the phone back to her. The thing is, Dad, I've come to realize that I want to rebuild our relationship. I want us to be a real family again. And I thought, what better way to start than by coming to stay with you for a while? We could spend time together, get to know each other again. I leaned back in my chair, processing what she was telling me. After 8 years of complete silence, she wanted to move in with me and play house. It was almost too convenient. Sarah, I appreciate that you want to reconnect, but this is a very small apartment. I'm not sure it would be comfortable for you here. Oh, Dad, I don't care about comfort. I just want to be close to my family again. Besides, it would only be temporary, just until I figure out what I want to do next. She was good. I had to give her that. Every word was calculated to tug at my heartstrings, to make me feel like the loving father who should welcome his daughter home with open arms. But I wasn't the same man she had left 8 years ago. That man would have been so grateful for this opportunity that he wouldn't have asked questions. This man had learned to be more careful with his heart. What about your things? Your life back home? Most of my important things are in those suitcases, she said, gesturing toward the designer luggage by the door. As for the rest, well, material possessions aren't as important as I used to think they were. That was certainly a change from the woman who had once told me I was too poor to attend her wedding. "Sarah, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "How did you find me? You changed your number, moved away, cut off all contact. How did you know I was still living here?" For just a moment, panic flashed across her face. Then that practiced smile returned. "Oh, I hired someone to find you. It wasn't that difficult, really. I should have done it years ago." She hired someone, just like I had hired someone to find her, just like Uncle Thomas had hired someone to keep track of me. We were all watching each other from the shadows, too proud to reach out directly until desperation forced our hands. "I see," I said. "So what do you say, Dad? Can I stay here with you? Can we try to be a family again?" I looked at my daughter, this beautiful woman who had broken my heart so completely 8 years ago, and I felt something I hadn't expected. Not joy at her return, not relief that she wanted me back in her life. I felt suspicious, because Sarah had always been a smart girl, and smart people don't suddenly change their entire worldview without a very good reason. And somehow I had the feeling that her very good reason had nothing to do with missing her father and everything to do with the $23 million that now sat in my bank account. The question was, how had she found out about the money? And more importantly, what was she really after? I let Sarah stay that first night, but I didn't sleep. I lay in my bed listening to her move around in the living room, hearing the rustle of expensive fabric as she tried to get comfortable on my old couch. Every sound she made reminded me that my daughter was back in my life, but not for the reasons I had once dreamed about. The next morning I made coffee and watched her emerge from the living room, looking perfectly put together despite having slept on a sofa that was older than her marriage. She had somehow managed to make herself look like she belonged in a magazine again, even in my shabby little apartment. "Good morning, Dad," she said brightly, as if this was the most natural thing in the world. "That coffee smells wonderful." I poured her a cup and watched as she looked around for cream and sugar. When she couldn't find any, she drank it black without complaint, though I could see from her expression that she wasn't used to my cheap grocery store coffee. "Sarah," I said, settling across from her at my small kitchen table, "we need to talk." "Of course. I was hoping we could spend the day catching up. I want to hear all about what you've been doing these past 8 years. I've been living the same life I was living when you decided I was too embarrassing to have at your wedding. Working as a maintenance supervisor, volunteering at the food bank, trying to figure out how to fill the hole you left when you walked out of my life." She flinched at the directness of my words, but recovered quickly. "Dad, I know I hurt you, and I'm sorry, but that's all in the past now. What matters is that we're here together, and we can move forward." "Is it in the past, Sarah? Because I remember you telling me very clearly that I was a pathetic poor old man who reminded you of everything you were trying to leave behind. Do you remember saying that?" Her face went pale, and for a moment the mask slipped. I saw genuine shame flicker across her features before she composed herself again. "I was young and stupid. I said things I didn't mean because I was scared and confused." "You were 26 years old, Sarah. That's not young. That's old enough to know that words have consequences." She set down her coffee cup with shaking hands. "What do you want me to say? That I was wrong? Fine, I was wrong. I was selfish and cruel, and I hurt the one person who had always been there for me. Is that what you want to hear?" "What I want to hear is the truth. What I want to know is why you're really here. I told you why I'm here. I want to rebuild our relationship. After 8 years of complete silence, after returning my birthday cards unopened, after changing your number so I couldn't even call to make sure you were okay, now, suddenly, you want to be Daddy's little girl again. People change, Dad. I've grown up. I've learned what's really important." I leaned back in my chair, studying her face. She was good at this, I had to admit. If I didn't know better, I might actually believe her. "Tell me about Derek," I said. "What about him? You said you were having problems. What kind of problems?" She hesitated, and I could see her calculating how much truth to reveal. We grew apart. He became very focused on his work, and I felt like I was just another one of his possessions. Something pretty to display at his business functions. That must have been difficult for you. It was. I realized that I had traded one kind of emptiness for another. I thought money and status would make me happy, but they don't. Not when you don't have real love in your life. Real love, I repeated. Like the real love you threw away 8 years ago. Yes, she whispered. Exactly like that. I got up and poured myself another cup of coffee, taking my time, letting the silence stretch between us. When I sat back down, I looked directly into her eyes. Sarah, how did you find out about the money? The question hit her like a physical blow. All the color drained from her face, and her carefully constructed composure shattered completely. What money? She stammered. The $23 million my Uncle Thomas left me. The inheritance I received 3 weeks ago. How did you find out about it? She opened her mouth, but no words came out. For the first time since she had arrived, she looked like the lost little girl I remembered from her childhood. I don't know what you're talking about, she finally managed. Don't lie to me, Sarah. You're here for the money. You found out somehow that your pathetic poor old father isn't so poor anymore, and you decided it was time to reconcile. Isn't that right? Tears started streaming down her face, but I couldn't tell if they were real or just another performance. That's not true, she sobbed. I came here because I missed you. Really? Because the timing is awfully coincidental. 8 years of silence, and then 3 weeks after I inherit millions of dollars, you show up on my doorstep wanting to be a family again. You don't understand, she said, wiping at her eyes. My life is falling apart. Derek is leaving me. He's been having an affair with his secretary, and he wants a divorce. I'm going to lose everything. Now we were getting to the truth. So you decided to come running back to Daddy? I had nowhere else to go, she whispered. Derek has all the money, all the lawyers. I signed a prenup that leaves me with almost nothing. I'm going to be homeless. And you thought dear old Dad would take care of you, just like he always did. I know I don't deserve it, she said, her voice breaking. I know I was horrible to you, but I'm your daughter. Doesn't that count for something? I looked at this woman sitting across from me, this stranger who looked like my child, but had the heart of someone I didn't recognize. Part of me wanted to comfort her, to tell her that of course she could stay, that I would take care of her just like I always had. But I wasn't that man anymore. Sarah, let me ask you something. If I hadn't inherited this money, if I was still just the poor maintenance worker you were ashamed of, would you be here right now? She didn't answer, but she didn't need to. We both knew the truth. I thought so, I said quietly. Dad, please, she begged. I know I made mistakes, but I'm trying to make them right. I want to be the daughter you deserve. No, Sarah, you want to be the daughter who inherits $23 million. There's a difference. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the street where I had lived for so many years. The same street she had driven away from 8 years ago without looking back. You know what the saddest part is? I said without turning around. If you had come to me 8 years ago and said you needed help, I would have given you everything I had. If you had called me even once during your marriage to say you missed me, I would have forgiven you instantly. If you had shown up here before I inherited this money and said you were sorry, I would have welcomed you home with open arms. I'm saying that now, she whispered. No, you're not. You're saying it because you need something from me. You're saying it because you found out I'm rich now, and you think that changes everything. I turned to face her, and what I saw in her eyes broke what was left of my heart. Not remorse, not love, but calculation. Even now, even caught in her lie, she was trying to figure out how to get what she wanted. Get out, I said quietly. Dad, please, get out of my house, Sarah. Take your designer luggage and your crocodile tears and get out. You can't be serious. I have never been more serious about anything in my life. She stood up slowly, her face a mask of disbelief. You're really going to throw me out? Your own daughter? My daughter died 8 years ago in a restaurant downtown. The woman standing in front of me is a stranger who happens to share her DNA. Fine, she said, her voice turning cold. Fine, but don't think this is over. I'm still your daughter, whether you want to admit it or not. And daughters have rights. There it was, the threat I had been waiting for. She wasn't just here for a handout. She was here to claim what she thought was rightfully hers. Get out, I repeated. Now. She grabbed her suitcases and headed for the door, but stopped before opening it. You'll regret this, she said, without turning around. When you're old and alone and dying, you'll remember that you chose money over your own daughter. I didn't choose money over my daughter, Sarah. You did, 8 years ago. The door slammed behind her, and I was alone again. But this time, the silence didn't feel empty. It felt like freedom. 3 hours after Sarah left, she was back. I heard her car pull up outside my apartment, the engine running as she sat there for several minutes before finally getting out. This time, she didn't have her suitcases. This time, she had brought reinforcements. Derek stood behind her when I opened the door, looking every bit the successful businessman in his tailored suit and expensive watch. But there was something different about him now, something desperate around the edges that reminded me of a cornered animal. "Mr. Morrison," he said, extending his hand like we were old friends. "It's been far too long." I didn't shake his hand. "Sarah," I said, ignoring Derek completely. I thought I made myself clear. "Dad, please, just listen to me for 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking." "You brought him," I said, nodding toward Derek. "The man who convinced you that I wasn't good enough to attend your wedding. What exactly did you think that would accomplish?" Derek stepped forward, his voice smooth and practiced. "Mr. Morrison, I think there's been a misunderstanding. Sarah and I have had our differences, yes, but we're working through them. What's important now is family." "Family," I repeated. Interesting choice of words, considering you spent 8 years making sure I wasn't part of yours. "I know I made mistakes," Derek said, and I could see him turning on the charm that had probably made him successful in business. "I was young and arrogant, and I didn't appreciate what Sarah was giving up to be with me. But I've learned from those mistakes. Have you?" "Absolutely. In fact, I want to make amends. I want to formally invite you to be part of our family again. We could spend holidays together, maybe take some trips. I understand you've recently come into some money, and I have to say that opens up a lot of possibilities for all of us." There it was, the real reason they were both here. "Possibilities," I said. "Oh yes," Derek continued, warning to his subject. "Sarah and I have been discussing some investment opportunities that might interest you. Real estate ventures, business partnerships. With your new resources and my business acumen, we could build something really impressive together." I looked at Sarah, who was nodding eagerly beside him. "Is that what this is about? A business partnership?" "It's about family," she said quickly. "But if we can also help each other financially, what's wrong with that?" "What's wrong with that," I said slowly, "is that 8 years ago you told me I was worthless because I didn't have money. Now you want to be my partner because I do have money. Do you see the problem with that logic?" Derek laughed, the sound sharp and condescending. "Mr. Morrison, let's be realistic here. Sarah was very young when she said those things. People change. Circumstances change. What matters is the opportunity we have right now." "The opportunity to what?" "To let you help me spend my inheritance?" "To build something together," Sarah said. "To create a legacy that we can all be proud of." I stepped back and looked at both of them standing on my doorstep, these two people who had spent 8 years making it clear that I was beneath their notice. Now they were here with their hands out and their practiced smiles, treating me like I was the answer to their problems. "Sarah," I said, "do you remember what you said to me that day in the restaurant?" "Dad, I've already apologized for that. You called me a pathetic poor old man. You said I reminded you of everything you were trying to leave behind. You said I didn't fit the image you were going for." "I was wrong," she said, but I could hear the impatience creeping into her voice. "Were you? Or were you just being honest about how you really felt?" Derek was getting annoyed now, his charm starting to slip. "Look, Mr. Morrison, we can stand here and relitigate the past all day, or we can focus on the future. You have $23 million, and frankly, you're not getting any younger. Wouldn't you rather spend your remaining years building something meaningful with your family instead of sitting alone in this dump?" The mask was coming off. Finally. "This dump," I said, "is where I raised your wife. This dump is where I worked 3 jobs to make sure she could go to college and have opportunities I never had. This dump is the home she was ashamed to bring you to." "Times change," Derek said curtly. "What matters is what we do going forward." "You're right," I said. "Times do change. For instance, 3 weeks ago, I was a poor old man, living alone in a small apartment. Today, I'm a rich old man, living alone in a small apartment. But you know what hasn't changed?" "What?" Sarah asked. "I'm still the same person I was 3 weeks ago. I'm still the man who loved you unconditionally for 26 years. I'm still the father who would have done anything for his daughter. And you're still the woman who threw all of that away because it wasn't good enough for you. That's not fair, she protested. Isn't it? If I had never inherited this money, would you be here right now? That's not the point. That's exactly the point. You didn't come here because you missed me or because you realized you made a mistake. You came here because you found out I was rich, and you decided that rich Patrick Morrison might be worth having a relationship with. Derek was done pretending to be patient. Look, old man, we're offering you a chance to be part of something bigger than yourself. You can play the victim all you want, but at the end of the day, you're going to die alone in this pathetic little apartment, and nobody's going to remember you existed. Maybe, I said, but at least I'll die with my dignity intact. I turned to Sarah, who was looking back and forth between Derek and me, like she was watching a tennis match. Sarah, I want you to listen to me very carefully. 8 years ago, you had a father who loved you more than his own life. You could have had that forever, for free, no conditions attached. But you decided it wasn't worth having unless it came with money and status. Dad, I'm not finished. Today you have $23 million sitting in bank accounts with my name on them. But you'll never see a penny of it. Her face went white. What do you mean? I mean I've already made arrangements to donate every cent of that money to charity. The food bank where I volunteer is getting the largest portion, but there are also donations going to homeless shelters, literacy programs, and organizations that help people who have been abandoned by their families. You can't do that, Derek sputtered. You can't just give away that much money out of spite. I'm not doing it out of spite. I'm doing it because those organizations understand the value of unconditional love and support. They help people without asking what they can get in return. Sarah was crying now, real tears this time, not the calculated ones from earlier. Dad, please, you don't understand. Derek is leaving me. I'm going to have nothing. Then you'll know exactly how I felt 8 years ago when you left me with nothing. This is insane, Derek said. Sarah, we're wasting our time here. Your father is clearly having some kind of mental breakdown. We'll contest this. We'll prove he's not competent to make these kinds of decisions. I smiled at that. Good luck with that. I've already had a psychiatric evaluation done by 2 different doctors, just to make sure no one could question my mental state. I'm perfectly competent, and I'm perfectly clear about what I want to do with my money. Which is what, exactly? Sarah asked through her tears. I want to make sure it goes to people who understand that love isn't conditional on bank account balances. I want it to help people who have been discarded by their families, just like I was. I want it to make a difference in the lives of people who need help, not people who just want to get rich quick. Derek grabbed Sarah's arm. Come on, we're done here. This old fool just threw away $23 million because his feelings got hurt. But I wasn't done yet. Derek, I called out as they turned to leave. One more thing. He turned back, his face twisted with anger. 8 years ago, you convinced my daughter that I wasn't good enough to be part of your family. You were right. I wasn't good enough to be part of a family that measures worth by the size of someone's bank account. I was too good for that. They left without another word, Derek practically dragging Sarah to their car. I watched from my window as they sat in the driveway arguing, their voices raised and their gestures angry. Finally, Derek drove away, leaving Sarah standing alone on the sidewalk. For a moment, I thought she might come back to the door. For a moment, I wondered if this might be the time when she finally understood what she had lost. But then she pulled out her phone, called someone to pick her up, and disappeared from my life for what I knew would be the final time. I sat back down in my old recliner and picked up the newspaper, but I wasn't really reading it. I was thinking about Uncle Thomas and his letter, about how he had understood that my worth as a man had nothing to do with my bank account. I was thinking about the people at the food bank who had become my real family over the past few years, who valued my work and my friendship without asking what I could give them in return. I was thinking about all the good that $23 million could do in the right hands, how many people it could help, how many lives it could change. And for the first time in 8 years, I felt truly at peace. My daughter had come back to me, just like I had always dreamed she would. But she hadn't come back for love. She had come back for money. And in the end, that told me everything I needed to know about the woman she had become. and everything I needed to know about the choice I had made. The money was gone, but my dignity was intact, and that I realized was worth more than all the millions in the world.